Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm doing a hypothetical 2028 presidential election prediction between Democrat New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and JD Vance, the Vice President of the United States of America. And in today's video, this is going to be a scenario video where when you look at right now, President Trump's approval rating is currently sitting at 46.5% approved to 50.7% disapprove. Trump is currently at negative 4.2% disapproved, which so far is the lowest numbers he's gotten in the RCP average in his second term. Particularly of note, Trump's view on the economy, approve is down 11.1% at 42.8% approved to 53.9%. For the sake of this video, this is going to be the 2028 election between Vance and AOC, where Trump does not really improve his numbers with the economy, whether it's with tariffs or the stock market. Things continue to remain poor going into the 2028 election, and so that's what this video is going to be based on today. That being said, there are still a good number of states we fully expect that we know how they're going to go, regardless of how the stock market or the economy is doing. For example, I fully expect AOC will win the state of Washington in the safe Democratic category, as well as the state of California. More likely than not, in this scenario, Oregon would be over 15 points as well, making it safe. Hawaii would be safe. Colorado's sort of borderline between being a safe and likely Democratic state. It went for Harris by 11 points. In 2024, went for Biden by 13.5. I'm going to leave it as likely Democrat for now, but that one is also very close to being a safe Democratic state. Illinois, I would expect to flip back to being safe Democrat after being under 15 points in 2024. Washington, D.C. will be safe Democrat, as well as Maryland, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Delaware, Connecticut, Vermont, and Maine's 1st Congressional District. The state of New York being AOC's home state, and in the scenario where the economy is doing poorly, I expect some of Trump's gains that were made in 2024 to evaporate, and the state of New York would go for AOC in a safe 15% margin. This puts AOC at 177, but there are some states that JD Vance I think will also win by more than 15% as well. Starting with the state of Utah and its 6 electoral votes, that'll be a safe Republican win, as well as Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, Nebraska, the 3rd district, and the state overall at large, and Nebraska's 1st district, I expect to all be over 15% for Vance. The state of Kansas was an interesting state because in 2020 it went likely Republican for Trump by 14.5%, but then 2024 was a 16-point win for Trump. I don't think AOC is the right type of Democrat to try to appeal to a lot of voters from the state of Kansas, so I think it goes over 15% as well. Oklahoma, I think, will be safe Republican. The state of Texas, normally I would have it be likely Republican, but Trump won it by 13.7% against Kamala Harris in 2024, and I do think AOC is probably one of the weaker Democrats when it comes to trying to win over a state like Texas, so I think Texas would go over 15 points. Florida I'd put in a very similar category. I think both of these would probably be likely likely Republican states, but with AOC at the top of the ticket, I think a lot of her policies being regarded as farther to the left would off-put a lot of Republican voters in these states and make them go safe Republican. Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri would all be safe, as well as Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, Indiana, and West Virginia, all of which would go safe Republican. This puts Vance up to 192, AOC's at 177. Now we get into the states I would consider to be likely for both candidates, meaning these are states that I think will be won by more than 5% of the margin of victory, but less than 15%. I'm going to start on the Democratic side of things, and I'm going to start with the state of New Jersey. After 2024, I voted for Kamala Harris by just about 6 points over Donald Trump. In 2020, however, it was a 16-point win for Biden over Trump. In this scenario, I think with the economy doing poorly and President Trump's approval numbers likely going to fall between now and 2028 in this scenario, I think AOC would gain some ground in New Jersey, still winning it by under 15 points, but some margins have been made up there. The state of Maine and its 2 electoral votes, it went for Kamala Harris by about 7 points statewide, and I expect it will be probably something similar in this scenario as well, maybe a little bit more, maybe up to 9 points or so, and that would go in the likely Democratic category. However, the 2nd district in Maine, I would still expect to be likely Republican, as Donald Trump won it in 2024 by about 9 points. Even in the scenario where the economy and such is not doing well for Trump, I do expect Vance to be able to hold the 2nd district. But the Nebraska 2nd district, however, this one went for Kamala Harris by 4.7%, In 2024, it voted for Joe Biden by about 6.6%. I have this just by the narrowest of margins over 5 points, going for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in the likely Democratic category. This puts AOC up to 194. Vance is at 193. The state of Virginia and its 13 electoral votes voted for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump by about 5.8%, closer than initially expected to be back when the campaign first started. In 2020, it voted for Joe Biden by about 10 points. I think Virginia is probably looking somewhere in the middle between those two numbers, AOC winning it by about 6.5 to 7 or so, and I think that would be likely Democrat. Vermont back to safe. There we go. AOC is at 207. Vance is at 193. The state of New Mexico. New Mexico is an interesting state because it was also a little closer than expected in 2024. It voted for Kamala Harris by about 6 points over Donald Trump. In 2020, it voted for Biden by about 11 points. 2016, with a lot of third-party vote, is about an 8-point win for Clinton over Trump. In this scenario, I think AOC would probably win it by about a 7.5% margin, making it a likely Democratic state. The state of Alaska, however, I would expect it to be a likely Republican state after it's voted likely Republican in every single presidential election going back a while now, from 24 to 20 to 2016, 2012, and back in 2008 was the last time it was above 15%. So I expect it to stay likely Republican there. This puts AOC at 212. Vance is at 196. Now we just have the last few remaining likely states. Starting with the state of Iowa, even with the scenario with tariffs and the economy being poor and hurting President Trump's approval rating, I do still think Iowa has moved a lot to the Republican direction, and Trump winning it by 13.2%. I think Vance at worst would probably be winning the state of Iowa by around 10 points or so. I think that will continue in that regard. The state of Ohio as well, Trump was able to win it by 11 points. This is J.D. Vance's home state. I think in this scenario, Vance would still win the state by a likely Republican margin. This puts Vance at 219. AOC is at 212. Now we're getting into the states that I would consider to be the main battlegrounds for the 2028 presidential election. But in this scenario, with the Trump and Vance administration being viewed poorly for the economy, things are going to shake out a little bit different than they did in 2024 in this hypothetical scenario. Starting with the state of Minnesota, Minnesota voted for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump by about 4.2%. In 2020, it was a likely Democratic state for Joe Biden at 7.1%. I don't think AOC does as well in the state of Minnesota as Biden did, but I think she does a little bit better than Kamala Harris, just barely putting it at likely Democrat, probably being around 5.5% or so. Now, the state of New Hampshire. New Hampshire voted for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump by 2.8%. It was a very close state in 2024, much closer than I expected. In 2020, it voted for Joe Biden by 7.4%. That is a likely Democratic win. In this scenario, I think AOC would be the one to win the state of New Hampshire, keeping it in the Democratic hands, but keeping it under 5 points and lean Democrat as well. Now we have AOC at 226, Vance is at 219. We go to the state of Arizona. Arizona, we just saw it vote for Donald Trump in 2024 by 5.5% after Joe Biden won it by 0.31% in 2020. I think even in this scenario, I do think J.D. Vance would hold on to the state of Arizona. I think under 5 points is certainly plausible, but I do think Vance would hold on to the state of Arizona. The state of Nevada is really, really close because it voted for Trump by 3.1% in 2024. 2020, it was won by Joe Biden by 2.4%. The question would be, would AOC be able to get a lot of these voters that flipped from blue to red in 2024 back to her side? I'm a little bit skeptical of that personally. I think Vance would win it by about 1.5%. This puts Vance up to 236. AOC's at 226. Georgia, I think there's a lot of Democratic candidates that could potentially do very well and win the state of Georgia. However, I'm not totally confident that AOC is one of them. Trump won the state by 2.2% in 2024, very, very close. Biden defeated Trump here by 0.24%. Georgia is going to be really interesting and really close in 2028. I do think Vance holds on to the state, though, in a lean Republican margin in this scenario. North Carolina at 16 electoral votes. This is a state I've seen a lot of people talking about potentially getting close. It voted for 3.2% for Trump over Harris in 2024, even though in 2020 Biden was able to lose the state to Trump by only 1.3%. In this scenario, I think Vance would still win the state in a lean Republican margin, but closer to the 1.2 than the 3 that Trump got in 2024 and 2020 is certainly possible. In this scenario, it comes down to the Rust Belt, where Vance is at 268, AOC is at 226. again, this is a scenario where the economy is doing bad and tariffs are doing bad, but AOC really is not the right type of Democrat, in my opinion, to get a lot of these voters in a lot of the southwestern part of the country and rural voters and such to get out and vote. She's not really the right Democrat to try and get some of these voters back, which is why I think we're seeing Vance still doing very strong throughout parts of the country. The question will be, does the Rust Belt follow suit? In this scenario, even with the tariffs and everything, I think Vance would still do probably stronger than AOC in the Rust Belt, but I do think there are some places where AOC would be able to do well. The first one I'm watching is Wisconsin. The Supreme Court election showed Democrats are energized in the state of Wisconsin. Trump won it by less than 1 point in 2024. Biden won it by less than 1 point in 2020. It's going to be one of the closest states in the United States again. In this scenario where, again, the economy gets hurt and tariffs do poorly, I'm going to give the state of Wisconsin to AOC by under 1 point in a very, very close race. However, next we have the state of Michigan. Michigan voted for Donald Trump by about 1.4% over Kamala Harris, and Trump was able to get a lot of voters out and go red in this scenario. Back in 2020, Joe Biden won it by 2.8%. The 2026 midterms will be a big identification of the state of Michigan. Has it gone more towards the Republican side, or has only Donald Trump proven he can win at the top of the ticket in the state of Michigan? In this one, I'm also going to be giving AOC the state of Michigan by under 1 point in a very, very close election scenario here. This puts AOC up at 251. Vance is at 268. It all comes down to the state of Pennsylvania, one of the closest states in the United States in terms of the 2024 election, voting for Donald Trump by just 1.7% in 2024, voting for Biden by just 1.2%, 2016 voting for Trump by just 0.72%. This is where the questions of AOC not being able to turn out as many rural voters that flipped from Obama to Trump and then maybe back to Biden and then back to Trump, this is where it would get very interesting because Vance's turnout would likely be lower than Trump's. But then again, AOC I don't think is the right type of Democrat to win over a lot of these voters. I think she'd maybe be able to squeak by winning Wisconsin and Michigan. Pennsylvania I think would be very close, but I would still have J.D. Vance nearly holding on and winning the state of Pennsylvania, giving him the victory at 287 to 251 in one of the closest presidential elections we've ever seen in the United States. And I do think that if another Democrat was running for this election, I think it's very possible the Democrat in this scenario would beat J.D. Vance. But I just think of the top Democrats, AOC is probably one of the weaker Democrats when it comes to actually being able to win over a lot of voters in the Rust Belt states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. I'm still giving AOC these two states because I think there's enough of a national movement in this scenario to get some of these Democratic voters in these states back, but I think Pennsylvania would very narrowly hold on under 1 point and would go for J.D. Vance. It's also worth noting the reason I'm choosing AOC for this video as well is some recent polls have come out that has now shown her up to third place in the Democratic primary, behind Kamala Harris in first place and Pete Buttigieg in second place, but she is rising up very quickly, which is why I chose her for this scenario. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a like. Leave a comment below, tell me your thoughts about this video, who you think would win between AOC versus J.D. Vance in this scenario where President Trump's approval rating continues to fall with tariffs in the economy and such. Very interested to hear what you think. If you think AOC won or would win instead of Vance, please let me know in the comment section below. I can't wait to read what you all say. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in the next video.